On Tuesday, November 8, 2016, Donald Trump was elected President of the United States based largely on his promises of building a border wall, of ending illegal immigration, and to impose a Muslim travel ban. John Kelly, then DHS Secretary, laid the foundation for the Trump administration's immigration-related policy choices for the years ahead. The memos of the prior administration, released by John Morton and expanded by Jay Johnson, that had defined prioritization of enforcement were rescinded under a new memo known as the Kelly Memo. Enforcement of the immigration laws to serve the national interest greatly limited the exercise of discretion by immigration officials under the Trump administration. The Trump administration expanded enforcement priorities so broadly as to render the term meaningless. As U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement stated in a year-end report, ICE no longer exempts groups of removable non-citizens from enforcement. In other words, all undocumented immigrants have become targets, even if they have lived in the United States for many years, have U.S.-born children, and have never had a run-in with law enforcement. On Valentine's Day of 2017, the day Ramon Flores Garcia was detained in Everett, Washington after staying at a Motel 6, Kevin McAleenan hosted a large meeting with representatives of CBP, ICE, HHS, and a smattering of White House hawks. During this meeting, two deputies of Tom Homans, Matt Albans and Tim Robbins, announced their plans for securing the border, which included separating migrant families. On Valentine's Day 2017, the day Ramon Flores Garcia was separated from his family after staying at a Motel 6, Immigration and Customs Enforcement internally announced their plan to deter immigration to the United States. This plan, coupled with the abolishment of discretion under the Kelly Memo, became known as zero-tolerance family separation. The intent of the policy was to send a message to all would-be immigrants through the misery of the parents and children who suffered it, that if you didn't travel to America on our terms, we will take your children away from you, and you might never see your family again. Tom Homan was the acting director of ICE, ideological father of child separation, and the man to oversee its implementation at the direction of White House advisor Stephen Miller. Homan acknowledged that many people would think him evil for proposing the idea, but he said it was intended to help families, not hurt them. Yes, the separated families would suffer, but at least they're not dead. On the afternoon of May 7, 2018, standing at the border in San Diego overlooking the Pacific, Jeff Sessions held a press conference. With Tom Homan standing at his side, he announced that zero tolerance was going into effect as a national policy. He said, if you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you and that child will be separated from you as required by law. In practice, immigration law rewritten by John Kelly and Jeff Sessions and implemented by Tom Homan, all at the direction of Stephen Miller, responding to a request from President Trump, meant that if you were traveling with your child, you were considered to be a smuggler and a trafficker of children. On May 7, 2018, Jeff Sessions announced zero tolerance was going into effect as a national policy. Despite denials to the contrary, this policy began its rollout in March 2017. The brutality of zero tolerance was immediately evident. Children were clinging to whatever part of their parents they could hold on to: arms, shirts, pant legs. Finally, the agent would pull hard and take away the child. It was horrible. These weren't some little animals that they were wrestling over. They were human children, said Nerys Gonzalez, a Salvadoran consular employee charged with protecting the rights of migrants in U.S. custody who had come from her country. Gonzalez was stationed at a CBP processing center in McAllen, Texas. The father of a 3-year-old lost his shit. They had to use physical force to take the child out of his hands, one Border Patrol agent told the Washington Post. The man was so upset that he was taken to a local jail. The next morning, the father was found dead in his cell. He'd strangled himself with his own clothing. Although the policy was officially ended in June 2018, in reality it continued for another 18 months. Between its initial adoption and its actual end, more than 5,500 children, including infants, were separated from their families. A deputy criminal chief for the Western District of Texas said, "The next issue is that these parents are asking for the whereabouts of their children, and they can't get a response. Can you hold on? My daughter is about to get in her car to leave and I need to kiss her goodbye," one government official said as she was in the middle of describing a spreadsheet of hundreds of complaints from parents searching for their children. The targets of the zero-tolerance policy were not criminals, but children, wrote Caitlin Dickerson in her Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation published in The Atlantic in 2022. She provided an exhaustive play-by-play of the secret history of the U.S. government's family separation policy. Though the idea was likely legal, it was wildly impractical. Executing it successfully would require hundreds of millions of dollars to build new detention facilities and months to train staff within both Homeland Security and Health and Human Services, the latter of which would be charged with caring for the separated children. Separating families was simply impossible. John Kelly told Trump that the president would have to ask Congress for the funds for it, knowing that he would never agree to do that, because that then links him to the policy, and he loses deniability, Kelly said. Rich Hunter, the second highest ranking official in the U.S. Marshal Service in South Texas, helped produce a report that was delivered to the Justice Department on April 27, 2018. It stated that the Marshals, like the U.S. attorneys, did not have the resources to implement zero tolerance. He said, "I could see the impact headed down the track straight at us, and no one had talked to us. No one had prepared us for this. No one had asked us, do you have space for this? Do you have resources? Manpower?" Government records indicate that, just like with Operation Streamline, zero tolerance began preventing Border Patrol agents and federal prosecutors from focusing on higher stakes work. As a result, a DOJ liaison said the Border Patrol is missing actual worthy felony defendants, including sex offenders. Zero tolerance was the Trump administration's attempt to stem illegal immigration by separating children from their immigrant parents. Department of Homeland Security declared that they were not resourced or trained to take on the responsibility. The Trump administration initially framed zero tolerance as a response to transnational criminals who were trafficking children by smuggling them under the false pretense of parenthood or guardianship. However, the Biden administration's Family Reunification Task Force had not found a single false family trafficking case. As a 30-year veteran of the agency, Hunter of the U.S. Marshal Service found the scene emotionally disturbing. "I remember their faces. You deal with this issue long enough, you realize that the overwhelming majority of people are not cartel members." Among the recipients of Hunter's report were both Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Both would later claim that the U.S. Marshals had raised no concern about the policy, but the idea had been raised and rejected before. Prior to becoming the acting director of ICE, Tom Homan had first proposed separating children from their families to the Obama administration. The idea had been rejected by Jay Johnson, the head of DHS under President Barack Obama. Johnson said family separation was raised and rejected for two reasons. First, I already had in my mind the vivid visual image of a mother clinging to a child in a Border Patrol holding station, and I was not going to ask somebody from the Border Patrol or ICE to take that child away. Second, it would have overrun government shelters for children, so it was both heartless and impractical. The official implementation of zero tolerance was a disaster. For 48 days, catastrophes cascaded. For example, one U.S. Marshal Service district official stated that because zero tolerance came out of nowhere, his district had not been able to budget in advance for the increased cost to ensure adequate medical care of detainees. Large-scale institutions had long since been eliminated from the domestic child welfare system because they were found to be traumatizing and unsafe. Indeed, many such facilities for immigrant children have faced significant allegations of physical and sexual abuse, and some have bypassed federal background check requirements to weed out predators. But they are where most separated children ended up, in part because the lack of advanced planning left no other option. When the entire HHS shelter system reached capacity, private companies eagerly accepted multi-million-dollar government contracts, housing children in huge facilities such as a former Walmart, which was at one point used to detain more than 1,000 children. Kirsten Nielsen, the director of DHS, had stated, "We're not ready to do this. We don't have any facilities. We don't have any training." Elizabeth Neumann, Nielsen's deputy chief of staff at DHS, recalls a career civil servant walking into her office saying, "I can't believe they're doing it. This is evil." Nielsen repeatedly blamed Congress for zero tolerance, suggesting that she had no choice but to enforce the statute that made unauthorized border crossing a crime, which was a lie. Outside Operation Streamline, few people were prosecuted in the decades prior to Donald Trump taking office. Child separation was a disaster. President Trump placed blame on Congress, offering the opportunity to fix the mess his administration had created through the appropriately named executive order, affording Congress an opportunity to address family separation. The order kept parents with their children, the primary targets of zero tolerance, through immigration proceedings. There are proven and reasonable alternatives to indefinite family detention in jail-like conditions. One alternative would be to allow community supervision of immigrants by nonprofit or government contractors. The Department of Homeland Security launched such a program in 2015, where families were monitored by social workers who helped them find housing, a lawyer, and made sure they attended their court hearing. Having a social worker resulted in a 99% rate of immigrants attending their court hearings, and it was dramatically less expensive than detention. In what should be a clear signal of his intent, Trump had ended this effective, more humane, and cost-effective program in 2017. After ending the program, his administration falsely claimed child separation and indefinite family detention reunification were the only solutions. When zero tolerance was finally abandoned, the plan for reunifying families was faulty to the point of negligence. Inside DHS, officials were working to prevent reunifications from happening. Between its initial adoption and its actual end, more than 5,500 children, including infants, were separated from their families. As of February 24, as many as 2,000 children remained separated from their parents.